Christy. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 27 of my 2020 holiday card series. Today I'm going to be using these two stamp sets from Sunny Studio. They are Winter Scenes and North Pole. So I've stamped them out on two separate panels and I'm going to be coloring them with my Copic markers. I'm going to start with the background and I'm going to do the house in the center in red. So I chose R46, R56, and R59. I'm going to start with that R59 and lay in a shadow down at the bottom of the building. And because there is so much coloring to do for today, I'm going to keep my light source really simple. I'm just going to put my shadows down at the bottom and blend as I get lighter towards the top. So I'm using that R56 to carry that color up, and then I'm going to use the R46 to finish in all of the white space on the side of the building. I'm actually going to end up bringing in a fourth shade for the front of the house just because there's a little bit more space to color there and I wanted another transition. So I'm going to bring in R43 for that, and I'll just finish the rest of the way up to the top where the roof line is. I'm also going to color all of the chimneys to match the houses. So for this one, I'm starting back over with the R59 and just blending up all the way. I'm even going to add a little of that R43 in there. And then I'll do two of the doors for the other houses as well. So I'm just looking for ways to simplify my color palette to make it a little bit easier to tackle one of these beautiful large images like this. I'm going to make two of the houses a light beige. I'm going to do the one on the far left and then the little one on the far right. So I'm using E50, E51, and E53, laying that E53 down at the bottom. I'm just going to do both of them at the same time since they're pretty small. And then I'll come up about halfway with that E51. And because these are set back a little bit further, they're not really the focal house in the image, I'm going to get away with just using three shades. So I'll use that E50 as the lightest. And then I'll also color the two chimneys to match. For the roofs of those two houses, I'm going to use E43, E44, and E47. And just like I did with the house, I'm going to put my shadow down at the bottom edge. I'm also going to color in the front door of the house on the left with these shades. Then I'll blend out with the E44 and save the rest of the roof for the E43. So I just did the first one by itself since I was also coloring the door at the same time, and then I'll quickly do the one on the right hand side. And having the front doors be a different shade just helps to differentiate the two as well. The final house I'm going to do in blue. I'm using B93, B95, and B97. And again, I'm starting at the bottom with that B97, blending about a third of the way for each of those shades, and then filling in the top with the B93. For the roofs of the two houses in the center, I decided to go with a dark gray. So I'm going to use C3, C5, and C7, and I'll save that C1 for something else in just a minute. I'm also going to give the red house a front door that is this kind of charcoal gray color. So I started with the C7 and then blended out with the C5. Then I used the C3, and originally I saved some room for the C1, but I decided that I wanted it to be a little bit of a darker tone, so I ended up filling that all in with the C3. And I also did a second layer of my darker two shades just to kind of help with that blend and smooth the transitions from shade to shade. And then I'm going to do the little blue house's roof with these shades as well. And I just thought that would help them also to have a little bit of a different look, to have two different colors of roofs in this little scene that we've got going on here. So then I'm going to take the C1 and I'm going to do the top of each of the chimneys and also the little front step in front of each house. Instead of doing the trees in green, I decided to try something different and make them all look like they are completely covered in snow, and this will be much quicker to color them as well. So I'm using BG10 and BG11, and I'm just doing about 3 at a time. I'm coming in from the left-hand side, so I had to tip my paper just a little bit to be able to flick comfortably, and then blending out about 1/3 of the way across with the BG10, and then leaving the final third just white. So I'm just letting that kind of fade into white. That's going to give them that frosty glow and just make everything look really nice and snowy. And because I am trying to make this scene be at the North Pole, it just seemed to fit. I think this would also look fantastic colored in green, but it would have taken a little bit more time to blend out all of those colors, and this made it really quick and easy to do them all the way across. So I did about half of them on screen for you, and then I'll do the other half off screen. And then I'm going to tip my paper in the other direction, and I'm going to add a little of that frosty glow up on the top of the snowbank. So again, just using that BG11 first and then blending out with the BG10 and letting that fade into white. And then I'll also go right under the edge of all of the houses just to continue that frosty feel and bring that color a little bit forward. And then I'm going to leave the whole rest of the focal panel down below just plain white. I'll use E25 and E27 to color in the trunks of all of the trees. So I just put a little E27 right up underneath the branches, and then I'm blending down with the E25. And then I also wanted to make the houses look like the lights are on inside, because this is going to end up being a nighttime scene. So I took Y11 and just added a little bit of a yellow glow in each of the windows on all of the houses. Then I'm going to move on to the second focal panel with our little Santa and Mrs. Claus images. Again, I'm trying to keep my color palette very simple, so I'm going to use E00, E00, and E11 for both of their skin. So I did a little shadow under Santa's hat and on the sides of his face, and then also for Mrs. Claus's hairline. I'm also going to do his nose and her ears. I used the E11 for the darkest and then blended out with the E00, and I'll save a little room for that E000 on both of them. I'll bring in R20 to give them both some rosy cheeks, and I'm also going to add a little bit of that to Santa's nose to make him look like he's been out in the cold. For their hair, I'm going to use W00, W1, and W3. I'm going to bring in that W3 from the sides of Santa's face up under his hat. I'll add a little to the bottom of his mustache and the bottom of his beard, just in a little flicking motion. And then I'm also going to use that on Mrs. Claus. I'm going to end up making her hair be just a little bit darker because I'm going to do a second layer of these same shades. So it'll just give me a little bit of a different look, even though I'm using the same exact markers. So I blended out with the W1 and made sure to add a little of that to Santa's eyebrows as well, just so that they had some shading on them. And then I'll use the W00 as my lightest and let that fade into the white for Santa's beard. For Mrs. Claus, I did her hair completely. And then, like I said, I did a second layer just to really increase that saturation and get a little bit of a different look for her. While I have those markers out, I'm also going to use the lighter two shades to add some shadows to any of the areas that I want to be white, and there are quite a few on these images. So there's all of the little white cuffs on their sleeves and on their clothing, and Santa's hat, and then there's also Mrs. Claus's collar and apron. And then the North Pole sign is going to have every other stripe be white as well. And then for any of the areas that I want to look black, I'm going to use W3, W5, and W7. So these are the same shades that I used for the roofs of the middle two houses on the scene. So it kind of reads as like a dark charcoal gray or a black. You could also add in the W9 if you wanted it to be even darker, but I feel like the darker you go, the more flat the object looks. It just doesn't really come to life because it doesn't have a lot of dimension to it. So I tend to use W7 as my darkest if I want to color black objects. Occasionally I'll add in the W9, but only in very, very small amounts. So I did Santa's belt and his mittens and boots, and then also Mrs. Claus's little shoes with these shades. And I did go around the holes in his belt, but then I colored them in with the W3 just so they would contrast a little bit. For my reds, I wanted to go with a more traditionally Christmas red than the reds that I used on the house. So I'm going with R24, R29, and R39. I'm going to lay in my shadows with the R39. I'm going to do it on the top of Santa's hat, right above the brim, on the underside of his arms, and down the sides of his body, and then also down on his little pants. And then I'll blend out with the R29, and I'm going to save a little bit of room for that R24, which is really going to make things pop. And this will just give me a little bit of contrast, like I said, against that house. I wanted that to be more of like a brick red or something. I think if I would have gone too bright on that, it would have just looked a little funny. But for Santa and Mrs. Claus, especially in a North Pole scene, I just had to go with that bright, cheery Christmas red. So I'm going to finish up coloring Santa, and having that highlight in the center of his belly just really helps it look a little bit more round and jolly. And then I'm going to move on to Mrs. Claus. I'm going to do her dress red as well. So this is obviously taking place before they go on vacation. If you saw my last video where Santa was going surfing on Christmas morning after he was done delivering all the gifts, he and Mrs. Claus took off for a tropical beach vacation. And Mrs. Claus was not depicted in that scene, so I did have people ask me where she was, and of course she must have been sitting poolside kicking back, because I'm telling you what, that she must be doing so many different things behind the scenes to help Santa get ready for Christmas, and just, you know, running the household and taking care of any loose ends like women usually do. So she deserves to kick back and relax and put her feet up, have a nice tropical drink, and just relax and read a book in the warm sunshine. I'm going to do the holly berries in her hair with the R29, and then I'll use the R29 and the R24 to color in every other stripe on the North Pole sign. I'm going to use E50, E51, and E53 to color in the cookies. And this is the same combo that I used on the two beige houses, so it's going to tie nicely in with the background. And I'll also use these shades to do the nice list. So I just put my shading on the left-hand side and blended toward the right. I used Y26 to color in Santa's belt buckle, and then G43 and G46 to color in the plate and the holly leaves, and then also Mrs. Claus's gloves. I thought they could also be pot holders, so either way, I just wanted them to be a different shade than Santa's. I'll use BG10 to add a little bit of color to Mrs. Claus's glasses, and then I will trim these out with their matching dies. So after all of that coloring, I'm going to try to keep the rest of the card fairly simple. I'm going to stamp a sentiment from Inside Greetings Holiday and then all of the snowflakes from Penguin Pals onto a piece of dark blue cardstock. This is Blue Jay from Lawn Fawn. First, I'm going to prep my card front with my EK Success powder tool, and I just had to open mine up because it's clogged. And then I'm going to stamp with Versamark ink, which is a clear sticky ink that works great for heat embossing because the powder is just going to grab right to that ink. So I'm going to coat that into some white embossing powder, make sure that it's completely covered, and then I'll tap off any excess. And then I will grab my heat gun, and I let that heat up off to the side for about 30 seconds because I wanted to have as minimal warping as possible since this is my card base, and I didn't want it to be all wonky. And then I'll just heat up all of that embossing powder until it turns white and shiny. There you can kind of see that. And then I'm going to grab a microfiber cloth and buff off any of that remaining white powder so that it has a nice clean look again. I'm also going to stamp an insert for the inside of my card since I am using that dark cardstock. So I used Lawn Fawn's Blue Jay ink to stamp one of the elves from the North Pole stamp set and another sentiment from Inside Greetings Holiday. So now I'm ready to begin assembling. The first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and add that insert to the inside of my card. I trim that down to be just slightly smaller so that I have that nice dark blue border on all four sides. And then I'm going to take my winter scene and I'm going to glue that down to the card front. I'm going to keep this card nice and flat so that it will be perfect for mailing because it's already going to have a lot of dimension on it just based on the scale of the images, since you have those deep set trees and houses, and then you're going to have these larger images in the foreground. It's just going to create a lot of depth automatically. So I added Santa over on the right, and I'm going to put that nice list in his hand. And then I'll have Mrs. Claus a little bit more toward the left. I'm still going to save some room on the left-hand side for that North Pole sign. But I'm going to add the cookies into her hands. And then I'll add that North Pole sign to kind of complete the little scene here. So I'm imagining that the red house is Santa's workshop, and then the blue house is where Santa and Mrs. Claus live, and then the other two are elf housing. And of course we can't have a icy cold North Pole scene without a little bit of sparkle. So I'm going to take some Stardust Stickles and I'm going to add it to the left side of all of the trees. I'm just adding it where all of the shading is. And that's going to help it look like there was maybe an ice storm similar to the one where Santa asked Rudolph to pull his sleigh. I'm also going to add it to the top of the North Pole sign and to the plate of Christmas cookies and the holly in Mrs. Claus's hair. And then I decided to add it to all of the little white cuffs and the Santa hat brim and pom-pom. Then I'll lift this card up to the light so you can see how it sparkles and shines, and give you another peek at the inside. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little North Pole scene and story. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. I post new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If you're interested in any of the products that I used, you'll find them listed and linked below the video. And if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos from previous years of holiday card series that I thought you might also enjoy. I hope you all have an absolutely amazing day. Bye-bye.